talk about health behaviors in the media and why we believe what we want to believe. Okay, and this is going to kind of get to the crux of some of the issues that Charlie mentioned about, you know, there's good science out there, and yet we go against good science in quite a frequent rate. Now, as a good speaker, I'm going to give you all my disclosures up front. So I have worked with industry in the past. The good news is all I've ever done with them is to work out how to do behavior change. So I help them develop programs so that healthcare professionals can talk more effectively with patients. I'm going to sort of get to why is it that we can have something as straightforward as coffee and have interesting science about it, but then also have a whole series of belief systems around it that will actually shift your viewpoint over that particular phenomenon. And I can substitute a whole series of different things in there outside of coffee. So what I am going to talk about, very briefly, I'm going to talk about health behaviors. That's what I do, and I know best. And talk about human behavior. Talk about the process of science a little bit, and quite briefly, and then kind of connect all these three together and hopefully get a sense of why is it that we have these issues that come up. So, I also like to be quite active in this, so there's a lot of audience participation, so I warn you ahead of time. This is a very simple question, right? Who here knows that the following things are good for you? So I'm going to give you up a list. Every time something appears, just put your hand up if you believe that this thing is good for you, okay? Doing physical activity. Eating well. Not smoking. Fabulous. And how many in this room does all of those things? Oh, that's pretty good. I think that's good. But that's about half the audience. Half the audience. So about 100% of the audience put their hands up to knowing that all of these things are good for them, but only half of you actually engage in all of them. I'm going to leave that with you. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Now, obviously, you guys are obviously convinced already, but I'm sort of obligated to throw this slide into every presentation I ever do just to reinforce my message. Why should we care about health behaviors? If you look, this is a beautiful diagram of all the causes of death in the world. And the bigger the bubble, the more of an impact it has. And I apologize that the slides are slightly small. And if you look on the left-hand side here, you kind of have three things that are pretty important. Heart disease, cancer, respiratory disease. Maybe the vast majority of deaths tied to that. And when you look at what drives that, it is primarily behavior. So I could take this graph and I could redraw it and take away diseases and put health behaviors. And what you'll see, probably won't be able to read, but what you'll be able to see on this left-hand side, these very, very two big bars. What are these two big bars? Smoking, doing physical activity, and eating well. Okay? And they dwarf every other bar by a long way. Okay? As it happens, out on the right-hand side as well, there's a whole series of other behaviors that are not as traditionally thought of. So even beyond that, so you can take all of those, and just to put it in context, this is a study looking at, they looked at people's lifestyle habits, and then tracked them over time to see who had a heart attack and who didn't have a heart attack. And from this, what they were able to estimate is about 80% of your risk of having a heart attack is driven by these set of behaviors. I'm just giving you lots of evidence of stuff that you already know. One thing I like to throw this in as well, adherence to medications. This is actually probably, out of all the behaviors, probably the most important to those people that actually have some kind of chronic disease, and yet we do a really poor job of this. If we take all the medications that are actually prescribed, that batch of medications that are prescribed, only about 70% of them are filled. And of that 70%, only about 50% are taken as they're supposed to be taken. So that translates to, in Canada, in our healthcare system, about 35% of all medications are taken as they should be taken. And that's behavior. Okay? So I just want to, that's my little rant about how important behaviors are. That's good. So, I'm going to come back to this slide. So on the one hand, you've got all these behaviours that all of you agree are really important, and I've just shown you a bunch of slides saying they're really important. And on the other hand, only half of you actually do all these things. And this is a classic human paradox. It's what's called the knowledge-behaviour gap. On the one hand, we know what to do, but on the other hand, we don't do what we know. Okay? And this is an important characteristic. So, who here? Another raise your hands. Okay? Do you believe that knowing what to do should lead to behaviour change? Just knowing it means that you will actually do it. One brave soul at the back. Telling people what to do will get them to change faster. No? Okay. People want your advice, even when they ask for it. No? Okay, no one believes that. Okay? What's important to you is important to others.
Nope.
Well, yeah. A believer over here. Okay? Okay. So in the past week, hands up here, who has expected someone to do something because it was obvious? Be there on time, take the rubbish out, etc. Hands up. Those people that have actually done that in the past week. Okay. Yeah. Who in the past week has told spouse, a friend, a patient, what to do? Okay. Who in the past has given someone some advice? Okay. And who has assumed that if being on time, maintaining a clean house, being healthy is important to you, then it must be important to other people? About half of you there. Okay. So this is clear examples of this knowledge-behaviour gap. In spite of knowing, we still do. In spite of knowing, we still don't do, sorry. You find a study that's best for you and you follow that. And the literature is full of examples where you can do it. So this is a beautiful graph that's quite often trotted out. And this is looking at foods, basic foodstuffs. And if on the left-hand side, these are individual studies, on the left-hand side, that study shows that it protects against cancer, that particular food. And on the right-hand side, shows that it causes cancer. Okay? And every single thing on that list has studies that show it protects and causes. Okay? So that's confusing, right? And it's very easy for people to look and say, oh, I really like beef, okay? I want to eat a lot of beef. I don't care. And there's this one study that shows it's okay to have beef. And of course, the way that science works is an iterative process, and when you take all that collective information, what you start to see is things start to sort of fall out and cluster together. So when you look at the mass of the literature, we start to see much clearer signals. Certain foods collectively are good for us, and certain foods are bad for us, okay? But it's easy to pull out that one study. And it's easy to then say, okay, I'm going to follow that. I'm going to believe in that. And it's confounded by the fact that most of this stuff will be, you should eat this, you should eat that. And if it's inconsistent with your own beliefs, then being told what to do will create a very negative reaction.
About, and I'm going to go fast in a second, about 50 journalists that came together recently, about 2 or 3 years ago, to think about their vision for their craft in the future, in the face of social media, in the face of Twitter, in the face of job losses, in the face of a world that's very different than maybe while they were there or what they thought it was. Whether or not they started 20 years ago or 1 month ago, things changed so rapidly that they wanted to think about that. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about. Within that context, there's this idea of health and science journalism, all sorts of traditional ideas that have gone into it, that you're a storyteller. And one of the things you're interested in is science literacy, helping people become more literate in science. That there's a value about what is new about science that I should tell somebody and what I should leave on the floor. If I have 500 abstracts to look through and I'm about to go to a conference, I have to quickly decide which 4 I might be able to cover out of those 500. How do I do that? And what value do I bring to it? That there has to be an element of curiosity and enterprise and writing and verification, etc., etc., etc. coming to that. Add to that a new world where our students now, if they want to do this, if they want to go out and talk about what Simon was talking about, need to have digital media skills. They need to be able to use Twitter. They need to be able to have a brand, to attract audiences, to talk about these things in certain ways. They need the basis of web designs. They need to be entrepreneurial because they may not have a job that lasts too long. They may need to move through things, or they may need to kind of find their way to tell the stories that they're important. They need to be super flexible. They need to data mine. They need to aggregate. There's all these things that come into these journals. So there's people who wanted to be like me 10 years ago or want to be now and move it forward in that kind of sense. Add to that a whole bunch of issues that kind of make all this confusing as we want to talk about it. We want to talk about what is a good message and what might be out there. Ideas of the internet, of social media, of a purging epistemologies about a kind of a direct-to-consumer model where people want what they want now and they want to be able to grab it, and if they can grab it quick or it can find them quick, that's what they'll go for. Not this idea that things will slowly flood towards them in some ways. And also this idea that we're living in a world where, in the face of all these messages and the things that John Oliver is talking about and that Simon was talking about, we see potentially a world where it might be a non-traditional or a non-journalist world in that kind of a sense. There's so many voices, there's so many people that can speak about this. Within that frame of mind, what do you do, and who do you trust, and who do you believe, and how do you bring forward the messages that you might think are good, and that you might want to convince people, or that you might just want to talk about in that sense? You kind of bring that all together in the sense of what are the core values and skills that might bring this together. I think at the base of everything that's talked about, and there's huge debates around this, there is this idea that what a journalist that might dive into this and might be brave enough to kind of talk and think about anti-vaccine movements or climate change or X, Y, and Z or issues that get people riled up, not just beyond self and highs, that in the end, what they want is good, and this is where it gets sticky. What does good mean, and what does it mean to you? What does it mean to others, and should I prescribe it or not? What is a good science health story that matters? And what is it that it matters to in that kind of way? When we talk to journalists and we think about who they are and what they want to be, there's really 4 types. And I'm not going to get you to read all this, so try not to read too much. I put it up there more for the reference for those that are interesting. There's a journalist that comes out there that wants to make the world more scientifically literate. They want to put more information out. They want people to be able to understand it. There's a journalist that wants to be contextual in the sense of the information might be out there, it might be valuable, but if I don't know how to use it, if I can't find the context of it, if you're telling me things about how to make my farm better, and I don't understand, or you're not putting it in a way that relates to what I do in the day, then it's not going to be of any value to me. So there's a contextual journalist out there. There's a lay expertise journalist, a journalist who thinks that not only experts should speak, not only Simon should be allowed to speak, but other people should have their voice, even if those voices don't stand up to scrutiny. That there's more than one type of expertise in the world, and that's a heavily debated role, but that's out there. And then there's the last, a type of journalist that really is about participation. They are there because they want to enable everyone else to be part of the conversation. I don't want you guys to be on that side of the wall, and me to be on this side of the wall, and all these things are happening, and you can't find out about it. It's about the fact that there should be conversations going on. Social media, many people are suggesting, are pushing 2 types of journalists out of existence, potentially. A science literacy journalist and a contextual journalist are having a much harder time making a living or putting things forward. Some would suggest it's a highly debated topic. And instead, we're getting more and more, and whether they're journalists or non-journalists or science bloggers or people that just like to talk about something, that are more interested in the roles of lay expertise, of making sure that everyone that should be able to speak can speak, or just public participation. That everyone should get out there, everyone should be involved in this, and everyone, if they're not equal, should at least have a chance to be involved in that kind of stuff.
There are 2 sides to every story, and you can make them sound as if they were equally important, which unfortunately often is what journalists do, because they've been trained when there's a controversial story to go to the expert, and you find one expert who'll tell you the story, you find an expert on the other side of the story, and you write it up, and it comes out as if these were equally weighted opinions, which they almost never are. The truth is always closer to one side than the other. We see this with climate change. I can't tell you how many stories I have read where they'll say on one hand and on the other hand, and it kind of leaves it as if this were a legitimate debate. It is not a legitimate debate. The science is clear. Climate change is here. Humans are involved. There's no doubt. The only doubt is cast by vested interests who do hire some writers to sell their point. So in any case, the point here is that Facebook can alert you to things. And when Facebook first appeared, I didn't think much of it. I thought, what on earth do I need this for? And then I got into it, and it was sort of fun at first. But then it developed into something that's much more fun, much more than fun, which I would have never predicted. It has become for me an excellent weapon to counter quackery, because I've developed a large following on Facebook, and I can get the message out very quickly. And they respond, and it's interactive, and it's really neat. So it has been a great addition to what we now do through my office at McGill. And I'll tell you a little bit about what it is that we do. First of all, the usual declaration: we do not have any conflict of interest, do not accept any money from any kind of vested source. It makes no difference to me, to my staff, whether or not any chemical, be it bisphenol A, be it the phthalates, be regulated or taken off the market. I thought, I'd be asked questions about how do you make aspirin, what's in lipstick, and the kind of questions you would expect a chemist to be able to answer. But almost from day one, it was always things like, is it true that? Well, as soon as you hear is it true that, the answer almost inevitably is no, because they have been Googling and finding silliness. Or they would say, is it true that such and such is dangerous? Or is it true that such and such is good for you? Those are the nature of the questions. And this, of course, is aided and abetted these days by the internet, which I didn't have to deal with then, but of course we do have to deal with now. And as you well know, of course, the internet can be either Dr. Jekyll or a Mr. Hyde. It is in fact both. I haven't been to a library in years. Why should I go? It comes to me with a few keystrokes. It's fantastic. I can't even conceive of how one would live today without the internet, although of course I fully realize that we did. We lived without computers. My PhD thesis was typed, and if you made a mistake, you had to retype the page. Well, today this is inconceivable. So information comes at us without stop on the internet. Unfortunately, a lot of it is not scientifically sound. There are all the cancer cures, of course. The implication that there is some sort of unholy alliance between physicians, the academic scientists, to undermine the health of the public so that we can sell them our expensive but ineffective drugs. And of course, these people know the answer. They have found the secret. In this case, the 31-day cancer cure. The amazing thing is that there are people who actually buy into this. Desperation will make people do desperate things. I've seen this over the years. And this is why these folk are dangerous. These are the ones who make tantalizing arguments about miraculous cures. Most notorious scientifically illiterate person these days on the web with the greatest influence is Vanny Harry, the food babe. She anointed herself with that name. She is something else. She has a website which is extremely popular. She has, I think, now over 7 million followers, which is an absolutely stunning number. I have 15,000, which is actually a pretty good number, but she has 7 million. And these people, who she calls her army, follow everything that she does and follow her advice. What sort of advice? Well, if you can't pronounce it, you should not be eating it. Really quite an amazing thing. You obviously cannot determine the toxicity of a substance by the number of syllables in its name. You determine its toxicity or its benefit by knowing what it is, its molecular structure. She portrays this image of scientists as evil creatures who are locked up in some sort of laboratory, just thinking about what new cancer-causing additive to unleash on the unsuspecting public. That's the image that she has and portrays of scientists. And she rose to fame a few years ago, riding one particular hobby horse. That was a yoga mat, actually. And this was her claim to fame. She discovered that the same chemical that was used in making yoga mats was also used by Subway in making their rolls. And this was a huge crime. She got a lot of publicity. She was on the talk shows, tearing apart yoga mats with her mouth. I don't understand how that made any sense when she was talking about how dangerous this was. But the focus was a chemical called azodicarbonamide. Azodicarbonamide, when heated, releases nitrogen gas. Nitrogen makes up 80% of the air. The reason that they use this chemical is to cause the rolls to rise. It basically plays the role of yeast. It is an additive that has been well tested. Food additives have to jump through all kinds of regulatory hoops and hurdles in order to get on the market. This one did. But she dug up some research that in gigantic doses in rodents, it caused some kind of problem. This is no surprise. Almost anything in gigantic doses in rodents will cause some sort of problem. The human, however, is not a giant rat, with some exceptions, obviously. But she will take any kind of rat study and blow totally out of proportion. So for her, azodicarbonamide was a poison. And if you were eating at Subway, you were eating yoga mats. Why? Because the bubbles in the yoga mat and the plastic are also made by azodicarbonamide. And she kind of transmitted this notion that the Subway company and other makers are putting huge amounts of this chemical into their food. Why? Well, the obvious reason is to kill off their customers. Not a good business move, that would be, right? Azodicarbonamide is a totally safe substance in the doses to which we are exposed. But this is her game, that if something is used in some other context, it should not be in food. That's nonsense. I mean, we use water to wash our garage floors. It doesn't mean that you can't drink it. Just because marble is used to make gravestones doesn't mean it can't be used to make calcium supplements. But according to her, of course, no. But here's the interesting ending of the story. The power of the social media, the power of this scientifically illiterate lady who has no background whatsoever. She has no science courses in her background. She has some courses in computer science. Not exactly the same thing as chemistry, biology, or physiology. But Subway caved. And they took the azodicarbonamide out because she riled up her army and they would stay away from Subway. It's amazing what this has happened. She also tells people what not to buy. Don't buy any kind of antiperspirant which contains aluminum. Now this goes back to still a bit of research out of the University of Reading in England with a study that was basically dismissed by the scientific community. It was an uncontrolled study which purported to show that there was some sort of a link between breast cancer and antiperspirants. Just by taking tumors, breast tumors, and analyzing them and finding some chemicals in there like parabens, which is a preservative. They never did any controls, never checked to see if healthy people also have parabens in their body, which of course they do because it's a ubiquitous substance. But anyway, she goes on railing about parabens and about aluminum, because aluminum, according to her, causes Alzheimer's disease. And then you go into her shopping store, because of course she sells things on her website. And what do you find? She sells a natural antiperspirant. She doesn't realize that what it is potassium alum and contains aluminum in higher doses than any kind of antiperspirant that you would buy in a supermarket. So she does need some education, and this is a book that I would recommend, although this might be a bit too difficult for her. This is more up her alley. But here is the real problem. It's easy to poke fun at this lady. Obviously I can. But she is dangerous. She is dangerous
Yes.
because there are at least 7 million people who follow her advice. And when some sort of nutritional controversy comes up, and CNN, of course, will deal with that, who do they call? Do they call Walter Willett of Harvard Medical School? Do they call Marion Nestle of New York University, who's got a big resume in nutrition? No, they call the food babe. She is on there on CNN answering scientific questions with zero knowledge of science. This is her brand of scientific journalism. As I said, it can be an angel or a devil, but you have to know how to interpret it. Talking about the devil, is there a devil on the internet? There is. It's not the food babe. She can be kind of, passed off as very soft nonsense. There is a devil. The devil's name is Mike Adams, who runs a website called Natural News, which has more followers than the food babe. He also has no scientific education. His main tenet is that there are things that are being kept from us by, this conspiracy between doctors and pharmaceutical companies. And I really hate to tell people to go to his website, but you do need to go there to see just how vile this man is. And he's against absolutely everything. He believes in every possible nonsense. He's into every conspiracy. He thinks that the 9/11 was engineered by the CIA. The Twin Towers were brought down from the inside. We never landed on the moon. That, of course, was a hoax. Dietary supplements can cure every disease known to mankind. And, of course, he also sells things. He sells things that contain no chemicals. Well, here's a case that perhaps he can be taken to task on for fraud. Because, of course, everything he sells contains chemicals. Chemicals are not good or bad, they are just the building blocks of matter. And if you're buying something that contains no chemicals, you're not getting a good deal. Because you're only buying a vacuum. He, of course, sells all kinds of dietary supplements, makes all kinds of claims about the ability to cure cancer. Don't take my word for it. Go check out Natural News, see what true evil is about, and what this guy is telling people to do. But most people, of course, don't do that kind of stuff, but they do try to educate themselves from the University of Google. And physicians these days, of course, are used to their patients coming in with reams of printout about what to do. They reference Dr. Oz, they reference the food babe, they even reference Mike Adams, because the information is so easy to garner, and unfortunately, much of it is unreliable. But if you know how to use social media properly, the information can be absolutely fantastic. I mean, to me, it really has been a godsend because you immediately know when something happens. Last week, when the study came out from the World Health Organization about GMOs, we knew it within minutes of its release. So that when you know how to work all of this, you can be ready to field all of the questions that come up, and of course they do come up. So I certainly don't knock the social media. In fact, we have joined it. We do have a website, which absolutely everyone must have these days. And we do have a Facebook. I also have my personal Facebook page, which is different from my office page. And the reason for that is that